Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. This is Gary Wilson, your host. We're glad to have you back. Hey, if you could go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so. It's on, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, 30 different channels. It'd be great if you go and just to subscribe to it. Makes things easier. We got a great guest today, by the way, Robert Taylor, who I'm going to introduce officially here in a moment. But while you're online, go ahead and go to globalinvestoragent.com website, and you can see the what we call investor agents. These are agents that are trained to work with you and me, the investors. And you know as well as I do, most agents are not trained to work with us. It's frustrating for them and for us. So we solve that. They're in 26 states. They know how to identify, attract, and analyze deals just like you and I, on and off market, which is a big deal, right? And they have access to every single property in the country. Doesn't matter if it's commercial, residential, every single address. They can see the debt, how old the debt is, who the debt is owed to, how long the property's been owned, all the usual bankruptcy, probate, foreclosure stuff, but a lot more. So we actually bought the system to do that. So huge advantage. If you're looking for somebody to put on your team and do the heavy lifting for you, grab one of these guys because it doesn't cost you anything. So in any case, without further ado, let me introduce Robert. So Robert, first off, thank you for taking your time to do this, man. I'm glad to talk to another fellow Baltimorean. It's good to catch up with some old blood every now and then,
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary, for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Good. Glad to be here and glad to have you. So, hey, if you wouldn't mind, obviously we have a lot in common where we came from and the fact that we're both in real estate investing. So if you wouldn't mind, give people a little bit of context, like where you're from in Baltimore, because Baltimore is a big city and there's some areas that are, older, smaller, some areas are out in the suburbs. So where you are, I'm pretty familiar with too, but talk a little bit about that. And then maybe we can get into some examples and maybe one or two of your favorite methods,
Absolutely. So like Gary mentioned, I'm from Baltimore City. I was born and raised here. I currently live in Owings Mills, Maryland, which is like the suburbs of Baltimore. I have a wife, 2 kids, 2 girls, 15 and 16, like to call crazy and crazier. They keep me pretty busy. My real estate business, I currently do fix and flips. I also have rental properties and do some new construction as well from an investing standpoint. I've been able over the last 5 years to do 60 fix and flip projects, small rehabs to full guts and damage. I got into real estate from watching HGTV, like a lot of you guys may have, watching fix and flip shows. And
yep.
My wife would be up all night talking about how can we get into the flipping business. And one day she was able to schedule me for like a free seminar, and I was hooked ever since, and kind of took the plunge into getting my first property and going out there and try to renovate houses. So now I help other people, fix and flip houses as well, and just kind of here to share any information I can to help people out there that want to get started.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you doing that because I know, I didn't get where I am by myself. I definitely had help, So in any case, and by the way, I do want to commend you publicly too, because I know when you do help others, it always comes back to you, and it's just the best feeling when you hear somebody on the phone with you 6 months later say, "Hey, Robert, I want to appreciate you showing me what you showed me. That one little technique just saved me $10,000 or just allowed me to make another 10 on."
Absolutely.
But let's start at the beginning. I mean, I know when I first got started, I was, of course, enamored by all the shows. But man, I didn't know I didn't know where to start. So for somebody just starting out, what's like the number one thing or the 3 things you can think of that would really get them started the right way,
Yeah. So I think the first thing is being exposed to it. Of course, I was able to listen to podcasts. I started going to podcast college while I was going to work. So I stopped listening to the radio. I would just get in my car. I had to drive, unfortunately, with traffic in Maryland, an hour and a half to 2 hours out to Bethesda, Maryland to work, right, every day. So I had a lot of time in the car back and forwards. And I said, I'm going to stop listening to the radio. I want to learn about real estate, and I would just listen to podcasts like yourself. I wasn't listening to it back then, but like yourself, to kind of help get a detail to understanding it. I heard so many different ways, fix and flip, wholesale, and rental properties, and was really trying to decide like which route to go. I tried to dabble a little bit in wholesaling. It didn't work because making phone calls to people's houses all day and they calling me while I'm at work didn't kind of line up with my business, my daily job. So fix and flip seemed like a better play because I kind of could hire people out to do the job while I was working at the same time. So listened to the podcast, said I'm gonna dive in, spoke to my wife. I wanted to make sure she was sure about what I was going to do because when I started taking money out the bank account, I didn't want her to freak out for these investments. Oh, yeah. So she agreed to me. She said she trusts what I was trying to do, and she was all for it. So I literally would get off of work every day and go to attend REIA meetings, so real estate investment meetings, try to network with people who I didn't know anything. So I would just kind of sit and listen to whoever was speaking at night, take notes, try to get some business cards from different people there, and then kind of started to build from there. I was able to get lucky and find a realtor there that had a little bit of investment background. Probably not as sharp as the people you have on your team, Gary, but he had some understanding of real estate to a point. So he kind of connected me to a contractor and kind of started helping me look for deals at that point. And it was hard. I mean, it took me 1 year to find my first deal. Like I really was trying. I was putting in offers. Yeah. All of the big boys would kind of beat me out. I couldn't win. So I just kind of had to keep trying at it and eventually got locked up my first deal. Super excited, dumped in head first, used the contractor that my relative referred to me. Okay. And that didn't quite work out as best as I would have liked that. So halfway through the deal, my first deal, the contractor actually walks out on me. Oh, so, wow. and I didn't know anything. So, and back to you said about coaches and just knowing, I just jumped in. I didn't know a lot. So I was overpaying the contractor. I let him get so far in front of me in terms of the money for the project. I called him up. One day his guys called me on the work site and they said, he didn't show up to pay them. And I paid him like days later, like $6,000 or $7,000. Oh, man. And I get to the job site, like, hey, I'm not sure what's happening. I paid the guy already. I'm not sure why he didn't pay you guys. They're like, well, he had us on a 2-week payment plan. So he was paying them 2 weeks out and I've been paying him every week, not knowing. So long story short, the guy disappeared. He don't pay the guys. And I'm sitting there with a house with the walls open. I have no construction background. I don't know what I'm doing to move forward. And they were going to walk off the job. If I didn't pay them, I think he owed them like $6,000. And so they was like, if you pay $6,000, we'll continue to work. If not, we're leaving. So I had to pay them the $6,000. Luckily, I had met a fellow investor that's been doing it for a while at one of these meetup groups. He wasn't mentoring me at the time, but I was able to call him and say, hey, can you help me? What can I do? And he was like, the best scenario would be for you to finish it out yourself, because he was like, if you bring in a new contractor, they're going to charge you a lot more to do somebody else's work. So, so I toughed it out, learned the hard way, got that property done. I like to say that I made $1,000 in profit on that property, but I'm pretty sure I lost money in terms of the cost because I was so behind the deal. But it was a lesson learned that I needed some help and I needed some support to kind of get me in the right place to flip houses. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think everybody's got at least one of those stories. I know I got a couple of them, but I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about wholesaling and you have some rentals too, which is good. So for everybody listening, a lot of we call them the late night infomercial guys are always promoting wholesaling. And I've done it too. I've in fact been on both ends of wholesales. I've sold them and I bought them, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. The challenge is to really build wealth, you've got to have either ownership to build up, capital over time, build up equity, or you got to earn, some revenue or some combination. So when you wholesale, what happens is you never own anything. And they'll tell you, well, hey, that's good. That means you don't have any liability. Well, it also means you have no way of building up any equity. You're wholesaling, you're selling a contract. And most people do it wrong. They get something under contract first, and then you try to sell the contract. A lot of times those deals fall through. So the seller, the owner, quite frankly, gets screwed. It's a everybody gets hurt kind of a thing. Low probability of success. Statistically, if they're being honest with you, they'll tell you wholesaling only works for very few people, right?
The next thing is buying rentals. When you have rentals over time, you build up cash flow and you have equity. So rentals is really the long-term way to go, but flipping is a great way to learn. You learn the ropes, you learn how to deal with the contractors, you learn all about electrical, plumbing, roofing, flooring, carpentry, foundations, all kinds of stuff, You learn everything. Plus it's fun. Flipping is a lot more fun than owning rentals. I'm telling you, I'm getting living proof, so.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear you're doing the flipping thing. And for everybody, remember, they're not always going to work out the way you want. Okay. But you learn as you go, and the more experience you get, the better you get, the more money you're going to make. And you heard Robert say in the beginning, he was getting beat out by the pros. Well, all you got to do is get that first one to make you a pro. I promise you. And then you'll do. So Robert, let's pick up where you left off then. So after that first one, did it get easier for you?
Yeah, definitely. Just to mention a point too about the rental properties. My whole intent was always to get rentals when I first got into the business. I just didn't have the capital to at the time to do it. So I was like, well, fix and flip, you can make these good profits, and then I'll roll it into the rentals. So that's what I was able to do. Kind of buy, fix and flip houses. Now I own 20 rentals right now, mostly single families and 2 units and stuff like that. But I did that over the last 5 years. So and looking to buy even more moving forward. So once I got through that first deal, while I was working on the first deal, I'm a little hard-headed when it bought the second deal. So I thought it was going well. I'm like, okay, I had a little bit more money left. I go buy my second deal. And that turned out pretty well. I was able to get it done, fix flip both of them, fix and flip and get them sold. And I was just working and I was trying to I'm a systems guy. So, I try to create a system. How can I make these projects work efficiently? Especially I was working full time. I had to make sure that everything could be managed, either from my cell phone or from me communicating on my cell phone or texting or something like that. So I established a relationship with Home Depot. They have what they call a Home Depot Pro account. Of course, I couldn't go to Home Depot and pick up materials. So they do this thing where it's like text to pay. So they actually send you a text and say, you can actually see all the items your guys at Home Depot buying. And you can press the button 1 or 2 to pay for it. And they leave with the materials. It goes into a computer system. You can actually look at the reporting and see, track it per project. So I utilize that system. And I just kind of started to did one flip, took the profits from the first flip, rolled it into the second and third flip. I didn't take any money out. I just said, because I was working full time, I had a good job. I didn't have any issues there. So I would just take the money and reinvest it. I was trying to create like a snowball effect. So I did, went from 2 flips at a time, moved up to 3 flips, kind of doubled that up. So while I was working full time, I was averaging somewhere between like 5 and 7 flips a year at that time. So just kind of going through them. And then once I kind of ended up leaving my job, I went to like averaging about 16 to 20 flips a year. Now I'm around about 25, 30 at this point right now.
Nice.
On good years that we scaled up to. But yeah, that's kind of moved on from there. It was a lot of lumps. I realized that one thing from the larger investors, they had a lot of advantages. So one of the things is that if you've been around for a while investing, you typically have cheaper funding. You typically have great relationships with people to get deals, and then you typically have good contractors that work for you that can finish your projects faster. So when you're starting out, you typically don't have any of those things. So I had to create my advantages, and I try to focus on efficiency of getting the construction done faster. So I said, I didn't have cheaper money. I didn't have, the best contractors, but I had systems that I could kind of put in place to get my guys to finish the projects quicker. And that's kind of how I got into be able to get some deals on a contract.
Yeah, it's true. It builds over time. And you mentioned your systems, and really, I mean, a house is actually a system of systems. You got a roofing system, you got a drainage system, you got an electrical system, all those systems. And flipping and real estate investing in general is the same thing. When you can see the repeat processes that allows you to build your systems, and then the contacts, like over time, I had probably 5, one time maybe 7 different crews working for me. But getting that first one, man, it was hard. I was picking the wrong people, making mistakes, and it was like everybody. But one good thing about real estate is it's a very forgiving investment. You can make a mistake in real estate and still be okay, not get washed out. Like you make a mistake in the stock market, there could be no recovery. Company could go belly up, and I mean, there's plenty of plenty of examples of that, but real estate never goes to zero, you know?
Yeah. State.
So
They say you make your money on the buy. So if you make the money, if you make a good decision on the front end and you really analyze your deal and do your due diligence, you typically are in a pretty good position to make some profit or even break even.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that front end. So when it comes to property identification, like how can a new person know, like, how do you identify a good deal? Like, you have a favorite method or a certain, like, here's the 3 things I do, Gary, when I go to get a property, they got a checkbox, check, something like that people can see themselves doing, We'll be right back with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast after I invite you to Monday Night Live. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I teach a class without fail for you on subjects ranging from flipping to buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, commercial, creative purchasing techniques, analyzing properties, identifying properties, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects. And if you are a licensee, if you have a real estate license, you should definitely tap in because there are a lot of investor agents also in the class. Many of them are on the global investor agent teams. You can learn from them as well as from me how to actually work with investors correctly and profitably. All right, we'll see you Monday night. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and register. We'll get right to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Yeah. So for me, I call it creating your house avatar. So you want to identify avatar in your area. Every city and state is different. So I like to start with the medium home prices. What are they selling for in your area? A place that you can go to get this information is citydata.com. Put in your different city and then see what the median price of a home is going for. So if a house is going for an average of $200,000, that's how much it's going to sell for once it's completely renovated and fixed up. Yeah. You want to make sure you're looking at comparable price houses that actually been renovated, open concept, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. So when you're looking on Redfin or Zillow, where you're looking at, those are the properties that are selling at the high dollar point. So you want to start there and kind of reverse engineer from that point. So if you take it there and let's say it's going to sell for $200,000, I use the typical LTV of 70%. So you don't want to be into that deal more than 70%. And that's typically what the bank will lend you on that property. They won't lend you over 70%. So if you go 70% of 200,000, which is 140,000, that 140,000 would represent your purchase and renovation costs. So you're all in numbers, I like to say, right? You don't want to be over that number. So when you go to a bank and you say, hey, I need funding for this deal, that's what they're going to be looking for. Are you all in terms of your renovation and purchase within that price range? So I look at that piece. That's the biggest piece I look at is the medium home price, because that's where I'm going to have my biggest audience or biggest group of buyers on the end when I go to sell that property.
Okay. I like it. Yeah, we use the same ratio, 70%. And then the other 30%, typically you'll have some of that's going to be some kind of carrying costs or overhead, commissions if you use realtors to sell them and stuff like that. But that means you're probably going to get 20% profit, which is not bad. I mean, sometimes more, obviously. So I appreciate you sharing that. If you wouldn't mind, I'd actually like to talk more about the area, the Baltimore metropolitan area, because not just because I used to live there, but it for a while now has been one of the best investor markets in the country. And yet it's kind of like not everybody knows that or pays attention to it. It's weird, So what kind of things you're seeing there, like as far as being in the Baltimore area, and what areas are doing better, and what do you see happening down the road? Or like I'm assuming your prices are going up like everybody else,
Yes. So Baltimore area, like you mentioned, is definitely always been a great, I guess, rental area, because you tend to get pretty high rents and you could buy properties at one point at $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 very cheap. That's changing a lot now. So in the market right now, we're definitely seeing house prices raised at the same rate that's kind of going across the U.S. But we're starting to get a lot of competition that's kind of coming in. So you see more buyers coming in, hedge funds. You can have people from Atlanta, DC, investors that start to come down to Baltimore because Washington, DC actually seen a lot of gentrification over the last couple of years. Yeah. So those properties are going, in the $1 million range. So they're running out of inventory there. So they're starting to come out to Maryland and buying this area. But there's still a lot of opportunity. I think I looked at a report the other day. We still have like 40,000 vacant properties throughout the city.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? So it's definitely a lot of opportunity here, but it's block by block. From living here, you can have one block like Canton, Maryland, where houses are going for $500,000, $600,000, and then you go 3 blocks over, and they might be going for $70,000.
Yeah, I know.
So and that's where some investors that kind of come in. You got to make sure that you look at. Most people tell you look at a half a mile radius when you're looking at comparables. In Baltimore, you really want to be about 0.20, 0.25, and it can really change going across the main street significantly in terms of the price of the homes. So you definitely want to look into those details. But we do have a lot of gentrification happen. John Hopkins is, I believe, to be the #1 employer here. So we have a lot of doctors, nurses, everybody coming in here to learn there, to even going to school or just to kind of like pick up all the details of what they do in that hospital. So that whole area in Oliver, is kind of growing over, and the city's investing a lot of money in like redoing the streets, investing in different businesses in the area, and really trying to change it over so we can kind of bring in more people into that space. So that's really shooting the values up. That's where I do a lot of my renovations at. I currently have, I think, 7 projects over in the Oliver area. And just to give you an example, when I bought my first property over there, maybe 2.5 years ago, I was selling them for like $160,000. Those same properties are going for like $305,000 now. So, so it's definitely where I can buy. I'll give you an example. One deal I just did on Caroline Street in Oliver, purchased a property for $55,000 from a wholesaler. The wholesaler, actually made some good money on the deal. Yeah. But I sold a house up the street a couple months earlier for like $260,000. So I was thinking, okay, I'll make $260 on it. The renovation was about $100,000. So, it was a full gut. Everything had to go, new framing, everything. Yeah. So we have this program over here called Chat Program. So what the city does is that they want people to start to buy back in the city and to stay there, to live there. So they give a tax incentive, which is called the Chat Program. So what it does is it locks the taxes in for 10 years for the buyer of the house when I go to sell it for what you purchased it at. So if I'm purchasing a house at $50,000, let's say the taxes on that house is $800. Yeah. Once it sells for $300,000, those taxes would be like $2,800. So they're actually saving $2,000 a year for 10 years just by me doing following the criteria for the Chat Program. And I actually give that to the buyer when they purchase the property. So long and short of it, I was able to renovate that house over 4 months and sell it for $305,000. Nice. So the net profit on that was like $96,000. So it was a pretty good deal. I have on that street right now, and I probably have 5 different projects now, because I try to, whatever area I focus on, I try to buy multiple houses if I can, because then I'm creating my own comps. So if I sell one house at this price, I know the other 2 or 3 down the street should sell for the exact same price. Yeah,
that's funny you mentioned that. And I was, after living in Baltimore, I told you I lived in Columbia for a bit, and then we moved to Virginia. From there, I moved up to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Pittsburgh was a lot like Baltimore, and that's where I made most of my money, actually. And we called it turn a neighborhood. So it wouldn't just be by myself. I'd buy as many as I could, but then a couple other guys I knew, we would go in and everybody would buy what they could buy. And then we would remodel and sell all at the same time and really, really push up those values. But we'd also go to the city and say, look, we're putting a lot of money in here. Can you please come in and give us, redo these sidewalks or give us some streetlights, things like that. And man, it was awesome,
Yeah, and the same thing. So what I also started to do is I started to buy rentals in that area too. I like to usually get a 2 or 3 unit or 4 unit. So I bought those in the same area because now my rental properties that I have there are going up in value at the same time to build that equity for long-term growth. So
yeah, wow. Hey, a little slightly different question here. You mentioned your job before. When I started, I was working also. I was working at a bank, not in a branch, but at the the headquarters. I was in IT, and so I started investing, and I was able to retire when I was 40 years old. So did you still have your day job? Have you left that or?
No, yeah, I actually left. I left back in 2018. By the time I I was leaving my job, I was making just as much, well, actually more, flipping houses than I was in my day job. I worked for McDonald's Corporation. Started as a crew person, worked all the way up the ranks to a deployment manager, which was in charge of like all products that rolled out for over like 1,200 stores. So I was making a good, 6-figure job, all the benefits, company car, all those things. Yeah. And, I remember we had a situation where they were doing some budget cuts. And they told all of us, like, look, we're going to have to make some cuts. We'll let you guys know on Friday. And you had to go to work. And at that time, I was a business consultant to like a franchisee. So I would kind of consult to them on how to run their businesses. Actually talking to millionaires every day. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm consulting them on how to run their business. And I haven't started a business for myself, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting in this lobby waiting for this phone call for them to call me and tell me whether or not I have a job or not. And it just started to reflect in my head. Like at that time, I was in the business working there for like 17 years. Yeah. So I'm like, wow, just with their decision, I would be out of work and I have a position for my family. And then what I was going to do. And I was pretty confident I could go get another job because I was pretty good at my job. But it was just like, that's a lot of control for somebody to have that could really make a difference in my life. So that's kind of even pushed me further to kind of look into the real estate space. And that kind of was the pivot in my life to say, I have to find another option that kind of be in place for my family so we can have things for the future and control our own destiny. So that really pushed me over there.
Yeah, it was funny. I always tell people I didn't think of it this way at the time, but I really bought my own freedom. And I did enough real estate investing thing. I woke up and wait a minute, I'm actually making more on my investing than I'm making in my regular job. It still took me several more months to have the courage to leave because it was, I had got kids and 401k and, 5
insurance.
Yeah. Insurance.
Everybody I spoke to was like, don't leave for the insurance.
Right. Well, I tell you what, that insurance now is peanuts compared to what I'm making now. So, but it was scary, man. And when I did it, I actually felt guilty for the next year because I'm like, in my home, I go out on the deck in the morning and read the paper and have coffee, and all my neighbors are driving off to work, and I'm sitting there, they're looking at the birds and everything, and I ended up working harder on my. So I did the same thing you did. I started doing multiple flips at the same time, and after about a year, I finally realized this. You know what? I earned this. I deserve it. I literally bought my own freedom. And it's something everybody can do. Doesn't matter. I mean, if you have the ambition and you can let yourself be teachable and coachable, I'm telling you, you can do this. So, hey, if you wouldn't mind, so I understand you've got a program too that you have, for teaching and coaching. Would you mind touching on that a little bit? Like how do people get a hold of you? What's the program like? I mean, kind of describe that a little bit,
Absolutely. It started off for us that I would get a lot of people ask me how could they get into the business, and from family members and friends to start off. I got my sister and things like that into the house flipping business, and so many people wanted me to help with that. So I was like, I need to create something to help these people out, because a lot of these things that made me almost lose money on my first deal and had the struggles that I had in the beginning because I didn't have somebody to talk to. I figured I could help with that. So I came up with a coaching program where I call it the 5 F's that we cover. So we go into the fundamentals, help you understand how to understand real estate lingo, ARVs, LTVs, and all these different terms that we use in this business, give you the foundation there, show you how to analyze deals for profit so you're not losing money on your deals. And then we go into the next part is funding. Where can you find funds at? That's one of the biggest questions a lot of people get. How do you fund all these projects and different ways like that? It's definitely going to require some capital out of your pocket. I'm like you, Gary. I don't believe in that. It's going to cost nothing to do this, but you can get funded for the big parts of the deals, do banking and so on and so forth. To fund your deals, we cover that piece on where you can find those sources at. Then we get into finding how do you find the deals to from different ways that we find deals to help you execute that piece. Mm-hmm. And then you go into the fixing part, managing contractors. That's a whole lesson in itself. What to look for, design. What designs work for your property itself, because a lot of people try to get into designing how they want their personal house to look versus what the market says and what's working. So we cover that piece there. And then flipping, the last part is flipping. What does that look like? Finding a good realtor, getting a real estate investor-friendly realtor like the ones you have, Gary, to kind of help with that piece. to get you over the finish line to get your property to sell quick. I see a lot of investors go out there and they'll renovate a property, put too much money into it, and then it sits on the market for a long time because they didn't have the right support or understand what really sells, and take the emotions out of it. So and that's what we're able to do. So my website, that if you guys want to get a free strategy session on how to do this, you can go to reiplaymakers.com and you can just sign up for that. We'll do a free strategy session, kind of tell you, what it looks like and see if it's something you want to do to move forward in flipping houses.
reiplaymaker.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I got one more question for you. I noticed this when I was reading about you. I'll just kind of loosely quote this, but having your partner on your side through big changes and entrepreneurial leaps is really important. So is that talking like specifically about your spouse, right, or is it just like kind of touch on that? Because I want people to know that this is a big deal, guys, and it's a real deal. I mean, Robert's been able to do it. I've been able to do it, and we're not the only ones. But having that support, I know my wife's family thought I was nuts. I was going to leave my day job, but she was for me. And then on my family, my stepdad was the one that was cheering me on. Everybody else was like, "You're leaving that job with all that benefits? Are you crazy?" They kept saying, "You're leaving all that insurance?" I'm like, but tell me about that, if you don't mind sharing a little personal side story there,
Yeah. Actually, like I said, my wife was the first person, I talked about getting to real estate. You have the conversations and you never really get off the couch. And she was the one who heard the seminar on the radio and signed me up for it. So she kind of got me that kickstart there. So that was being supportive. And then when I was talking about leaving my job, it was definitely, of course, I was nervous. I'm sure you were nervous when you're leaving your job because it's like a steady place. I've been there so long. And I'm like, even though I've seen some success, I was like, is it going to continue? And you don't know. And she was very supportive. I remember when I left my job, she had my family throw a dinner for me. Mm-hmm. So my mom's there, my uncle's there, and a couple of my family members. And she surprised me with it, right? Like, "Oh, we're going to go here for dinner." And everybody else at the table faces like, "What are you doing?" And she's the only one sitting there like, "Oh yeah, I have 100% support that you can do this thing." And she's always had support from the beginning that I could do it. And whatever happened, that we would work it out together. And that's important to have that thing. I think if I didn't have that support, it wouldn't have been easy for me to get off the steps and kind of get into the game and really change our life. I mean, we've been able to see, a lot of great things, like you said, financial freedom, and just opportunities that we open doors for other people as well. I think you mentioned earlier when we were talking about helping other people see successes a lot of times a lot better than you get it yourself, because it just gives you this feeling inside. So to see somebody go from making, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 a flip, and that, even if it's part-time, how much that difference that makes for their family, being able to take a vacation, being able to go, to invest in other things for their future. That's what real estate does for you. That's what it did for me. It's been able to allow me to live on my own terms. Yeah. And if we want to get up and leave and go take a trip, or, if I decide to sleep in, it's my choice. And that's what real estate's helped me with. So definitely important to have a supportive spouse.
Yeah. Well, I love that story too about the restaurant. My first thought was, well, you sure showed them, didn't you?
It's funny because I made a recording. I was showing it to my daughter. She's 16. I was showing her when I decided I was going to put in my 2 weeks, I was at work on a business trip in a hotel. And I just was like, you know what, now's the time. And I kind of recorded a video and I was like, look, this is me about to leave my job. I'm about to bet on myself. And, to fast forward, 4 years later, and to be able to do so many properties and do so much in the real estate space in a short window, to show that to your kids, I think, she was like, wow, you really called it out, Dad, and it happened. So, this is fine.
Well, I know we're going over time, but I want, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I'm 42.
So you retired in 2018. You were 38 then.
38.
Congratulations, 38. Man.
Thanks. 38 years old.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what. Funny. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, if I'd have knew what I knew now about real estate 20 years ago, I'd probably be retired a lot earlier.
I was actually teaching a class one time for another, it wasn't my own subject. It was another teacher and he invited me to be a guest teacher along with another guy who was my partner and an accountant. And so we were the guest speakers, and we worked together. And the teacher, the main person, asked the class, "What would you like to ask these guys? They're here. You don't have to pay them anything. They're just here to help you." And the first question was, if you could do anything differently, what would you do? And both of us, totally unscripted, didn't even look at each other at the exact same time, said, "I wish I'd have started earlier." The exact time. And it was so compelling because it was so natural and authentic. And that guy that asked the question, by the way, ended up becoming one of my clients or one of my students. And he ended up buying like 4 or 5 properties that first year. So, and I know everybody says, "Hey, you can do it too." But I'm telling you, if you are teachable and coachable, okay, and you're willing to follow instructions, doing it on anybody can read a book, right? But only certain people will actually implement doing it the right way. And having somebody like Robert help you through that process, man, is invaluable. So take him up on his offer, guys, and go to the website and check that out. And while you're there, once you do that, then go to globalinvestoragent.com, grab yourself an investor agent.
Absolutely.
If you don't see one or whatever, just you can email me and I'll hook you up. I know a lot of people I've taught in all 48 lower 48 states for literally 6 years straight, over 1,000 classes. I taught over 24,000 people, almost all investors. Almost all agents looking to help us investors. And a lot of investors will go and get their license, right, to make their business better. So in any case, thanks, guys, for listening. Robert, thank you, man, for taking your precious time away from your family to do this. I know you're a busy guy and successful, and I know we're lucky to have you, man.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate the time. And I hope you guys have a great day.
We will. And for everybody, listen, one more favor. This is a good one. If you could please go on, when you finish listening to the podcast, go online, whether it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Apple, and leave a review for Robert's podcast interview. It's the currency of podcasts. It's what makes the world go round. We don't get paid to do this. You don't pay to listen to it. But the reviews is what makes it all work. So leave Robert a good review, and we'll see you in the profit zone. All right. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.